accept any prompts you're given. I'm going to share my screen and share the audio. I'm going to mute myself and move to chat with Danielle before we open.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's so good to see so many familiar names in the Zoom audience. Feel free to turn your cameras on during this session. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Danielle Hartunian. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations for the Gallatin School of Individualized Study at NYU. And we're thrilled to welcome you to our session today, Conversation with the Gallatin Dean and Alumni Changemakers. And we're also excited to welcome you to NYU Alumni and Parents Weekend, which kicked off earlier this week and is now in full swing. We have some amazing Gallatin events, starting with this one today and 2 faculty talks this afternoon. So if you haven't added those to your agenda yet, go ahead and search for the Gallatin events in the event portal, and you can add them to your agenda so that you don't miss out. Before we get started with today's program, I did want to share a quick announcement that one of our awesome alumni, Gallatin Alumni Award winners, Ellen Kurz, is unable to join us today, but you can learn about Ellen's work and her award as a changemaker in her full spotlight on the NYU Alumni Changemakers website, which we've shared the link in the chat. Thank you, Jess, for that. I also want to give a quick shout out to our amazing Gallatin team who's working behind the scenes to make all these events happen this weekend. Jen Burge, our Associate Director of Theater Production and now Zoom production. Rachel Plutzer, our Senior Director of Events and Special Programs, and Jessica Lee, our Chief of Staff and resident Gallatin alum, which we always love to mention during these events. I'm also excited to formally introduce our Dean, Susanne Wofford, who will be leading the conversation for today's session, featuring Dr. Frank Leon Roberts, Alicia Waller, and Jayshawn Lee. Susanne, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone to Alumni Day. I am indeed Susanne Wofford, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to the exciting panels we're offering today, not only this one, but the afternoon events, and also to this specific event to honor our alumni who have just won the NYU Changemakers Award. And again, I want to give special thanks to Danielle, Gallatin's amazing Associate Director of Alumni Relations, who has organized all the great events for this weekend. So thank you, Danielle. Before moving on to the main part of our program, I just want to say a word to the wonderful alumni of the Gallatin School. We at Gallatin are truly fortunate in having a very engaged and committed group of alumni. Many of you are still connected to the school and to your former teachers and advisors, and that's a really great benefit to Gallatin. And many others of you are very committed and engaged in your community. And in that way too, it's a great benefit to the school. So as a dean, meeting and working with you and honoring the achievements of Gallatin alumni has been one of the great pleasures of my job. You're just as amazing, creative, and out of the box as you were when you chose to come to Gallatin. And it's really a delight to see how you're going on and making such a difference in the world. So first and foremost, this is a salute to the wonderful Gallatin alumni and an expression from me about how much I enjoy being connected to you. And before I go any further, I also want to take a minute to honor the Indigenous communities that have cared for the land that NYU and New York City stands on, in particular the Lenape people, who have lived here for centuries and will live here in the future, as a school that is very, very committed to concerns about climate change, among many other things, recognizing the Indigenous peoples who cared for the land and sustained it is something that's very important to us as a school. So recognizing that this is unceded territorial land that the city stands on, and of course, therefore NYU also, is really important. And it's also important to me as an individual because I come from a settler family. So it's important to me to recognize that not only the history, this is not just in the past, but an ongoing present situation. So having started with acknowledging those important things, I want to turn to the first and very exciting part of our program to honor and be in conversation with one of our alumni in particular, Dr. Frank Roberts, who, as you heard from Danielle, is one of 2 Gallatin alums who won the NYU Changemakers Award. And we're also going to have a conversation with 2 other recent alumni who are also change makers in their worlds, Jayshawn Lee and Alicia Waller. But so first, Frank. Frank has his BA from Gallatin and his MA and PhD from Tisch in Performance Studies. So he is a double NYU alumnus, though we at Gallatin will always claim him and not allow Tisch to have him. He is currently assistant professor of theater at the Eugene Lang College of Liberal Arts in the New School. So congratulations to Frank on an awesome job as well. I'm going to say a fair amount about Frank because we're very proud of him, and you will see that he is no stranger to awards and honors. Frank is an educator, political organizer, speaker, and he's a founder of the Black Lives Matter syllabus. Created in 2015, the Black Lives Matter syllabus is a nationally acclaimed public educational curriculum that encourages people to become better organizers by becoming better readers. That's part of a quote from him. His course, Black Lives Matter, Race, Resistance, and Popular Protest, is widely recognized as the first college class to focus solely on the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was also one of the first courses to invite Black Lives Matter organizers to train students in anti-racist organizing techniques. Beyond the classroom, Frank's pioneering work has been covered by amazing numbers of media: CNN, NPR, the San Francisco Chronicle, the New York Times, lots of major media. He is a 3-time recipient of the NYU President Service Award. and the winner of the NYU Michael Parks Distinguished Alumni Award, and the MLK Trailblazer Award, and now the NYU Alumni Changemakers Award. So you'll see what I mean about he's no stranger to awards. But listen to this. In 2019, he was named a Roddenberry Fellow. Now, you may not have heard of the Roddenberry Fellowships. They recognize 20 activists annually across the entire country of the United States for their impact on the country's most severely marginalized communities. The Roddenberry Fellowship was launched only in 2016, so every year it becomes more and more famous. And as I say, it's a national award, and this is a quote from their website. It's awarded to extraordinary leaders and advocates who use new and innovative strategies to safeguard human rights and ensure an equal and just society for all. It's a 12-month program that offers fellows $50,000 to take an existing initiative, a campaign, an organization, a program, to take that to the next level and amplify the impact of the program or launch a new initiative. So it's a pretty darn cool award and really a big honor. Frank also co-founded the National Black Justice Coalition, a nonprofit that's now the nation's largest civil rights organization dedicated to the empowerment of Black LGBTQ+ communities. Since launching NBJC, the National Black Justice Coalition, Frank has started the Baldwin Hansberry Project, a nonprofit that centers on grassroots mobilization and Black queer activism. So super congratulations to Frank. You can see that he keeps himself busy. This is not a person who just kind of sits around in his chair and gives a couple lectures to his class. So it's really an amazing record, and all of those awards totally deserved. And we'll come back to Frank in just a minute. Before we move on, I'd like to introduce our other two alumni interlocutors who will join us in conversation in just a few minutes. And they too, as I said, are change makers in very important ways. The first is Jayshawn Lee, who is Jayshawn, you can wave, is a 2021 Gallatin BA graduate. So fantastically, is already doing things, but it just graduated, who concentrated in the political economy of global equity and poetics. He is currently a poet at Ars Poetica, a growing global poetry company known for typewriters and swanky outfits. So you can explain that to us in a minute, Jayshawn. He is also a program assistant at Echoing Green, a nonprofit that funds and supports global leaders engaging in social impact and racial equity through its biannual fellowship. And additionally, he is completing his MA in Human Rights Studies at Columbia University. So another person who doesn't just sit back and do nothing. He is an extremely busy person. And then I want to also introduce Alicia Waller. You actually had the great pleasure of hearing some of Alicia's music at the beginning of this program, and maybe Danielle at the end, we can put it on again in case some people came in late. Alicia earned her MA from the Gallatin School in 2017 with a concentration in international relations and a very cool thing she's named music diplomacy. She is a multi-talented singer-songwriter whose vision is to inspire intercultural connections through music. She has a background as an operatic soprano, and Alicia has since focused on soul music and the African diaspora as the foundation for her EP, Some Hidden Treasure, released in February 2020. Her voice and sound have been hailed as, quote, flexible and virtuosic, which I think is a great description. Her work and process were recently featured also in the documentary short, What Moves You by Sky Hour. She is a 2021 awardee of grants from New Music USA, the Jerome Foundation, Lower Manhattan Community Council, and the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. So you can see that all three of these amazing alumni are incredible, incredible change makers. And I thought that we might start, Frank, by having you say a few words from your perspective of where things are. Then we can begin a conversation, and then Jayshawn and Alicia can jump in, because I'm very interested to hear what they see as the next steps for them as change makers. So congratulations again, Frank, and I'll turn the baton to you for the moment, and we'll start a more general conversation.
Wow. Well, I am truly already speechless. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. It is truly such a blessing and honor. All I can say is what an amazing time to be alive, right? In light of everything that's happened over the course of the past 19 months and everything that's continuing to happen, the fact that we got some folk who were willing to gather together on a Saturday afternoon in honor of Gallatin and our tradition really is special. And I also just want to say, I know this is being billed as a celebration of Gallatin alumni, but I just have to highlight the importance of Dean Wofford. I'm so grateful to you and your leadership. I was not so when I graduated undergrad, you were not dean. But when I started teaching that Black Lives Matter class, which really opened up so many doors, that really was as a result of your leadership, right? And there were so many other administrators across the country who wouldn't have taken that chance to offer a class. Now those classes are being offered all over the place. But back in 2014, 2015, it was a risky move. And Dean Wofford, thank you for being a revolutionary change maker in your own right.
Well, we were lucky to have you, Frank, that's for sure.
So I'm sorry, I totally got lost. What am I supposed, you want me to?
Do you want to make an opening statement a little bit about what you've been up to and how you see the world and change right now, or do you want to just launch into more of a conversation? I thought each one of you might have a moment to sort of talk and say some things about where you are, and then we would sort of have a conversation about how we see the world and what possibilities there are. So it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, so who am I? It's funny, the older I get, Dean Wofford, the more that question always sends me in an existential crisis when people ask me to describe my work, because I'm like, well, where do I start? The work in the academy or the work outside the academy? They're very much connected, but they're very distinct. Really quickly, I would say in the academy, kind of straightforward, my work as a scholar is really in three areas. African-American literature, particularly dramatic literature. So after Gallatin, I went to, as you mentioned, NYU Tisch, and I studied under a lot of literary scholars like Fred Moten and the late Jose Esteban Munoz. And I wrote my dissertation on James Baldwin and his forgotten life as a playwright. And so I'm working on a book right now on James Baldwin's life as a dramatist. I do also work in Black intellectual history with the real focus on Black radical social movements, of which the Black Lives Matter movement is, of course, just one of the many movements that Black people have created over the course of the past 400 years in their quest for freedom and liberation. And then lastly, I would say that all of my work as a scholar is informed by the interdisciplinary project of Black Studies, which has a long and rich tradition of beginning with this idea that intellectual inquiry has to be married to political action. So that's kind of in the academy. Outside of the academy, my work as an organizer, as you kind of mentioned, has really gone off in three different directions, all of which I'm always trying to honor. So on the one hand, for the past 5 to 8 years, a lot of my work has really been about training educators, both at the university level and beyond, on how to create anti-racist pedagogy or incorporate anti-racist pedagogy into their curriculum. I'm really interested in this idea of teachers as frontline activists. And a lot of my work is around that. Secondly, a lot of organizing work around mass incarceration, criminal justice reform. I'm an abolitionist, so I'm always interested in conversations about a world without prisons and police. And then lastly, the third direction, as you mentioned, is really always been about creating conversations within the Black community about a vision for Black life that is free not only of racism, but also free of homophobia and sexism. And so thinking intersectionally is very important to me. I could stop there. I could talk about why Gallatin matters in all this, but I think it's probably best for me to hush up and pass the microphone so we can all talk together.
All right, well, that sounds good. And I just want to say the work on Baldwin sounds really great. He has wonderful plays. And I guess I sort of knew that they were not really known as well, but they should be. And so that's really great And, you know, one of the questions I was going to ask you, but I'm going to first turn it to Alicia and Jayshawn, you know, was precisely, you know, thinking a little bit about why it matters to do the academic side as well as the activist side, why it matters to you. Not everybody would make that choice, but, you know, how that fits together for you, because I think it's really an important part of who you are. But how about Alicia or Jayshawn? Why don't, Alicia, do you want to start? And then Jayshawn, to just say a few words about yourself and, you know, what you're thinking about where we are right now in the world. And then we'll just open up to a few, I'll throw out a few questions and then we'll open up to a conversation.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alicia Waller. Really happy to be here. And thank you to Dean Wofford for having me, Danielle also for spearheading just incredible alumni movement, and also Dr. Roberts. It's a pleasure to listen to you and hear about your work. And congratulations to Jayshawn as well. So I guess my background is listed in the bio that was graciously read. Thank you. My background's in classical music, and I have definitely since moved on into a different realm of music making, which is more centered in jazz and soul music, as I'm the band leader of an ensemble called Alicia Waller and the Excursion. We focus on kind of really ambitious pursuits of musical sounds. We do some global covers, which is very much related to my work at Gallatin. And we also, of course, perform a lot of my originals, which are kind of that jazz soul fusion. One of the central components of my work is very much reflected. It was already percolating prior to the last, year and a half, almost 2 years. But it's become even more relevant for me is the idea of really centering a Black woman's voice very ambitiously and very undeniably. Really centering that such that she is seen, she is heard vocally. Our perspectives, not that I represent all perspectives, but the perspective that I have is a contribution, and really centering us in a musical realm that we're very much centered, obviously jazz, but owning our own voices, that isn't as centered. And so it's important to me to make sure that that's pushed up to the forefront. And that's one of the most important things that I try to accomplish in my original music work. And then also as a aspiring musical diplomat, it's hard to claim fully right now, but I have done some work with international communities. Most recently, I did a project not in South Korea, but a collaboration with some South Korean artists. And it's very important to me to use music or endeavor to use music to really genuinely connect people across international borders. That was the basis of my work at Gallatin, and that's something that I have actually been quite serious about continuing in my professional life. So I don't know if I've done a good job, but that's me.
That's really great. And the international one, I admire and envy musicians because there is an international language that you all speak and can share and can communicate in, even if the other languages, you only have a little bit of each other's language. So that's very cool. Jayshawn, do you want to jump in with some thoughts about yourself and where you see yourself as going?
Yeah, definitely. Again, thank you everyone for having me here today just to share, and of course, learn from all of you. Like Alicia, for example, I'm familiar with some of your music. I believe you had some of your work at Say It Loud that we have at Gallatin in the past, and it's just amazing. So it's good to connect and go forth. I love this idea that you brought up about like language and myself being a poet. You see, I have my typewriter right here, which is a new addition to my poet life. I think of poetry just as a communal tool because language is just that. It's a way that we can enter a space like this. We're using words to translate and engage ideas. And with my work with Ars Poetica, we're this poetry group, a collective, and a lot of our work just finds ourselves popping up in different places, whether it be through workshops or whether it be through sitting out in a park one day, just typing poems for the general public and just having people give us pieces of their lives and pieces of their stories. And I think so much about that in the way that I imagine myself as a change maker in the future, just understanding how much other people can teach me and how much I can give back to them in that sort of crossing between their ideas and my own ideas. It relates very much so to the work I do with this nonprofit called Equine Green, which I currently work. And a lot of the work we focus on seeks to find like global leaders who have a strong focus on social impact and more forthgoing racial equity in their own relative sense. Just understanding that people who are most impacted by a social issue are the experts as well as the creators of knowledge on that. Thus forth, they should be the ones informing any advocacy that goes forth on it, any ways that those ideas and issues should be resolved. And of course, I'm also studying human rights at Columbia right now, just trying to have a stronger centering on this idea of what it means to be human, who's allowed to be human in a sense of access, in a sense of language, who has to be human in all these different ways.
Muslim of olives within Palestinian.
Sorry, no worries. And just using that as also centering between these different aspects of my life. So very much so like Frank and Alicia and everyone of the Gallatin tradition, always being interdisciplinary and just trying to merge all these lanes together. So thank you for having me here.
That's so interesting. It's so great that you have the poetry and you're still keeping it going, and you have I mean, obviously you'll always be a poet all your life, and you have the sort of human rights study, and then you have the activism. So I think it's great to think about how those things braid together in who you are, but that's really awesome. Well, I thought I might start by asking a couple questions, and everyone, you all three should feel free to jump in, and then at a certain point we'll try to open it up to everybody who's here. But why don't we start with the three of you for the moment? So Frank, one question that I was curious to hear from you is how you find the students different now from 2015, 2016, and from 2020. Do you see us in a new moment, or do you see a real continuity? I'd just be very interested to hear, you know, the ways in which, because you're dealing with young people who are encountering some of the work that you do for the first time. So I'm curious to know, and I can put the same question in a different way to Alicia, to say that, you know, do you feel a different sense of audiences? But let's start with Frank first, because I am, as a teacher myself, interested in the academic question of how do things seem different, and how does the world seem to those students now, and how do they respond to some of the work that you're teaching?
Yes. The students, you know, all teachers like to say that their students are their teachers, but I can truly say as each semester rolls by, my students truly have become my teachers, right? That they are so ahead of the curve. There was a kind of older model in the academy where professors would kind of lord over and pour into a student's cup. And that has thankfully, long since kind of been pushed aside, where it's really my students that teach me, quite literally, first of all, what they value, right? They are much more clear around political priorities, around language, around identity, and also around teacher-student interactions in terms of how we can make the classroom a truly equitable space where all of us get to pass the microphone. And I've noticed that. So I think I say all that to say students in 2020 are much more aware and sensitive around these issues than they were even in 2016. And I'm really grateful for that, Susanne. I really am grateful for that.
So do you find that there's a real difference? I'm sort of curious about what I see as three moments. The teaching before the Black Lives Matter movement took off in the way that it did after George Floyd. During that moment, and then whether now you see a continuation of the energy from that period, or whether you see students, you know, my experience with students is that they quickly think that generations ahead of them are past and they want to make their own way. So they're already saying that, oh yes, that was a moment, but we're somebody different. But I'm very curious about whether those are three moments that you feel are quite different. And if so, what it means for what we should do now. Or if you feel like the energy from the Black Lives Matter movement is carrying on in really vibrant ways in your current students, so that it isn't really a different moment, it's just a continuation. That was sort of my curiosity.
Yeah. And I guess I can actually take that as an opportunity. I probably should have clarified what in the world the Black Lives Matter syllabus is, because it's very much related to this question. So in spite of its title, Black Lives Matter syllabus doesn't really refer to a specific reading list or a particular class, even though it has been both, right? But it really is an impulse. I describe it usually as a national organizing campaign that emphasizes, as you mentioned, this relationship between studying and reading. And one of the things I learned just really at Gallatin studying Black studies is that when you look at all the great Black organizers in American history, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Ella Baker, Rosa Parks, et cetera, all of these people were, before they were extraordinary activists, they were first extraordinary readers, right? That Martin Luther King, his philosophy of nonviolent civil disobedience was based on his readings of Gandhi. And the Black Panther Party wouldn't even exist had they not been reading the works of Karl Marx. That phrase, power to the people, actually comes from Marx. What I'm getting at is that one of the things that I try to emphasize to students, but they're more aware of now, I think, than they were before, is that in order to be a change maker, you first have to be engaged in the life of the mind. And what I see both in 2021 and in 2015, but even more so now, is that students come to the classroom not simply wanting to understand the world as it is, but to be provided with concrete tools for changing it, for making it anew. And I think that that's really the role of politically engaged educators, to give students tools for not simply understanding the world as it is, but strategies for dreaming up new worlds. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it does kind of explain what my experience has been in the classroom with these students and with these issues. Yeah.
Right. So I'm wondering about Alicia and Jayshawn, how you see that sort of moment that we're in, whether it's changed in the world that you're in, or you see it as more of a continuity from a moment of incredible cultural transformation and going on with it. So either one of you should jump in, which whoever would like to go first.
Yeah, I can share some thoughts on that. I truly believe that we are in a Renaissance moment. That's especially relevant for me as an artist. I talk with my band, I talk with other creators about that. We're in such a kind of forceful time of cultural shift, as you said, Susanne. And that I find, you asked earlier about audiences, I find that audiences are hungry in a way that I didn't even expect. For me personally, I was always a little like, oh man, nobody cares about these like big, like colorful jazz sounds. Nobody's interested in that anymore. And I'm finding that there is a thirst for it. I think that there's a thirst for depth right now, and there's a thirst for, once again, depth. There's a thirst for something that is going just a step beyond. I think we're beyond surface level right now because we've all been through so much, and we're looking collectively for a way to understand. And that's the work of art, to help us piece together kind of emotional, I don't know, our emotional worlds. We're looking for ways to understand that and feel that and make sense of it in a way that might not always be intellectual, but is intensely felt. So I think that audiences are hungry for it.
Yeah, I definitely feel both of you on that sentiment, that this idea, there's this reciprocity of knowledge, right? It's not so linear going from top to bottom, but I might look at Alicia and just talk about music, not being a musician myself. And I can pull so much from that, from a conversation, from something like, oh, what are you reading? What stories are impacting you? What narratives, why is it music that influences you in this way? And I feel that so much from my peers at NYU, being now at Columbia, that we do look at each other, right, to sort of create ways to interact and engage in the world, to be more collective, especially like Frank mentioned earlier, like after this long, like 19 months of being like inside and secluded, there's an even stronger intensity to find ways to be connected, to keep learning from each other, to keep pulling and giving from the different ways that we sort of create and understand knowledge. Both one that is rooted in text. You go back to, like you mentioned, like great thinkers in the 60s, the Black Panther Party had a reading list, right? That they would say, here are some books you should read that informed you so much. And while doing that, also engaged in practice, a sort of idea of like theory and praxis just being both important. Both fuel me so much, and I definitely see it in other people as well.
It seems like there's a unifying set of ideas here about the relationship between activism and intellectual life and the importance of that larger framework. And I think it's really an important thing that you guys are saying, partly because I don't think that's anything that you see in the media. You don't see accounts of people protesting and talking about the ways in which they were influenced by books or their deeper intellectual life, and especially not the leadership. I think there's a very strong stereotyping quality in media accounts. So this seems like a really actually enlightening, but really important emphasis. And I think so I'd be interested to hear in a minute. I think we should probably open up to let everybody join in this conversation. But I'd be interested to hear if you have thoughts about what you think it may be that Frank has somewhat already answered this, but your future directions will be. Do you feel that 5 years from now, where do you think you might see yourself? And where do you think we might be as a country because of the activism that we're all committed to? You know, I know that I sort of feel sometimes you don't want to ask that question because the gods will strike you down, you know, for hubris and thinking that you could predict. And right now, so much of the news is so depressing and horrifying that it feels that the importance of activism is all the greater, partly to establish as hope and the possibility of thinking in a new way. But I'd be curious to what you would say to that question of both where you think yourself might be and where you think we might be. Maybe not 5 years, but you know, some years from now, 3 or 4 years from now. So I don't know who wants to start with that. Frank, do you want to say a word about it? Or?
The easy question, right? Now that this great, difficult question. You know, all I can say to that is that I am a first-generation college graduate. I'm the son of 2 formerly incarcerated people who are no longer here. I live in Harlem. I live with and around poor and working class people. I see myself being there. I always see myself being there, right? And so it's very important for me to be connected to the people who continue to catch hell in America. I always see myself as doing that work. That won't change. And also just listening to your comments, Dean Wofford, I was thinking, you know, Alicia talked about this being a Renaissance moment, which is so true. The other side of this is to also for us to recognize this is also a backlash moment, right?
Yes, right.
We don't hear many narratives about the influence that books and the world of ideas have had on activists. On the other side of the political aisle, we actually hear quite a bit about the danger of dissonant knowledge. You know, you think about the attack on critical race theory going on right now, how that's been used as literally a political wedge issue. So there is an understanding by the powers that be and by the status quo, so to speak, that it is dangerous to be having these conversations about linking intellectual activity to political action. And so in the wake of that danger, I imagine part of my work and the work of Jason, Alicia, Dean Wofford, all of us will be to continue to push back against that backlash, to continue to actually create those opportunities to merge intellectual inquiry with political action, because let's be clear, the powers that be are very, very afraid of that merging, which is why we see in this moment this frenzy over things like critical race theory. Does that kind of start to get at the question?
Yeah, That's really helpful, because I should have mentioned that, and you're absolutely right, that on the other side, we've had, I love your formulation, which is that the fact that the certain powers that be, or right-wing leaders, and even just not even that right-wing conservative leaders, have seen the link between intellectual life and activism and are very afraid of it. So I think that that's a really important point. So yes, I think perhaps that is true, that the next steps include us all in our different arenas defending both critical race theory in specific, but also the broader reality that it represents, which is understanding a much diversified intellectual history. And including some of these, we might, from my point of view as a literature professor, sociological sort of things, such as really educating people on the history of incarceration in the last 40 years in the United States. It's an incredible history, and most people don't know it. Even people who have suffered from the oppression of mass incarceration don't actually really know the history necessarily. And certainly white people don't. In general, I think there's an ignorance of the incredible expansion of incarceration, which I think started around the 70s. So that's a whole arena that's important, but so is the philosophical and the theoretical, and what we might call the cultural critique that is part of this. So yeah, your point is really well taken. What do the other two of you think about that?
I'll jump in. That's a challenging question, Suzanne. I've been sitting here thinking, where do I think we will be? And honestly, in some ways, the thought kind of terrified me, which is something I hadn't considered. There's a lot of fear in where we are, and a lot of what the cultural conversations that we have often right now, especially when we look at media, it's often kind of centered around a terror. So when I think about where we're going, I think the easiest thing for me is to speak to where I hope we will go. And I hope that, especially as a music maker, it matters very much to me to continue to push sound and ideas forward. The other day I was talking to a colleague mentor of mine, and I said, my pure aim as an artist is to make a contribution to the legacy of Black sound. This is a very long line that I'm a part of. And I just want to do my part. I want to make a contribution. It's important to make a contribution, but it's also important to remember that that contribution must move forward. We must aim to move it forward. And one of my frustrations as a music maker is sometimes the climate that we've created kind of almost makes music and art almost too big to fail. We become corporations such that musicians are often asked to make things that are, or feel, because I feel that pressure also, make things that will be received well, that we're certain will be received well. Right. It unincentivizes, forgive me for messing that up, but steers us away from being creative, just pushing and imagining and moving forward. So I hope to be continuing to do my part in moving music forward. And I also hope that we are creating a landscape collectively where we continue to imagine and push our thoughts, be they creative, be they intellectual, be they activist, to keep pushing forward. And I hope that we live in a culture that is receptive to dynamic change.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. I think you're right that the fear, the sort of pressure of fear that's the media particularly, well-intentioned people bring, not only stifles creativity, but makes it harder for people to believe that activist work will make a difference. So even though it's often, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, Trump might be reelected, and fear strikes in your heart. It's intended well, but the result is really one. I've had to sort of turn off some of my news media because they're just they really upset me so much. And they're all just trying to do that to get attention. It's part of the capitalist model of media. But I think you're right to emphasize that the tension between the fear and the anxiety that's out there on the one hand, and the value of creativity and the importance of an artist to bring that creative energy to our current moment. So Jayshawn, I don't know how you see that.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough question, because anytime you sort of try to make a call to imagine or reimagine, especially in this moment, we're really trying to map out ways to create institutions or spaces that don't look like anything that necessarily have existed before. And I think even when I think poetically, sometimes when you give yourself a lot of space to create, sometimes you end up feeling like you're not going anywhere or you're not moving at all. And I just hope there's like a stronger stir away from that sort of feeling, a feeling of like depravity. And I hope that collectively, like as years go by, within 5 years, there's a stronger collective feel of everyone just feeling like they can reimagine or imagine together, that we don't have a fear that, well, if a classroom doesn't look like this, it may be failing just because it looks like nothing we've had before. Or if we have a space where we, I don't know, create art together, like because it looks like something that didn't exist, or it produces itself in a different way that doesn't have a sort of, I don't know, imperial or capitalistic goal, but still builds people up to have things they desire. What would that truly look like? And that's a lot of work. And I think people across all generations, classes, I mean, in a sense, if you feel a call to that, you feel some sort of burden by it, be it in different ways, be it in different states as well. And I'm honestly just really curious to see like, what would that look like? A sort of collective calling to just accepting that, and just going forth with that challenge after. I mean, you're asking the toughest question out there, maybe. Yeah.
Can I just say one quick thing, Dean Wofford? And I know we're gonna open it up,
Yeah.
because the conversation just led me to another place really quickly. I also think as Gallatinites, right? Let's call ourselves. This moment really does present us with the opportunity for thinking about the necessity of interdisciplinarity as really a metaphor for coalition building. I mean, when I really think about what matters to me about my training in Gallatin is that it really is true. It allowed me to think about interdisciplinarity as a kind of model or metaphor for coalition building. Because when you think about what interdisciplinarity is, right? Bringing in multiple voices on a particular issue, going into new territories, reaching across the aisle, metaphorically, so to speak. All of those skill sets translate radically well to social justice work. And so I do think we have to think about how interdisciplinary training the next generation of interdisciplinary leaders allows them to be that much more equipped with the skills of reaching across the aisle, speaking to multiple voices, denying or rejecting the idea of a single narrative. That to me is the kind of political possibility of interdisciplinarity. And I think that's something that as Gallatin grads, we inherit.
That's really a fantastic statement. So I want to encourage everyone who's here to turn on your video and to participate in the conversation, sharing a point of view or asking a question. If you're willing, it'd be nice to see you. The goal of the Alumni Weekend is conversations among alumni. So if I can, so far nobody, there we go. Yvonne is jumping in. I think it's really nice for people to just be able to have a conversation and share in your thoughts. So I've been asking questions, but not wanting to suppress your questions or your comments. You don't have to have a question. You might just have a view of where you think, what you think the current moment is providing for you as professionals in your worlds, as artists, whatever you are. So any of you guys want to jump in and say something, or I just want to leave a space to try to encourage it. So far, I've only been able to provoke 2 alumni to turn their cameras on. So Yvonne, why don't you jump in?
Okay, I would just like to say thank you to you, Dean, and to Danielle for this just great opportunity. I would like to say your first question that you had asked, how are things different? I think whatever year we've come into Gallatin, we've all come in with more or less the same one or two things. One, we had an idea of what we wanted to do. The other, we didn't have an idea of what we wanted to do. But Gallatin, as far as I can see, has always been there to allow us the door open for, if you want to say constitutionally wise, freedom of speech, freedom to do whatever we thought we wanted to do, and Gallatin allowed us to try. And trying is the first step. And what I see so differently now, Gallatin opened those doors for us, but Gallatin, you as a faculty and you as the dean, and I've seen it over this past year or so with Danielle, have really brought us together.
Yes.
We were not together like this in 2017 when I was there with Alicia. I was there in 2015 and saw it. It was not the same feeling as we have right now. And I think Alicia can somewhat agree with me. We were like still trying to find ourselves within our own little circles of being. And this is what I thank you for. This day that is just so beautiful. We've never done this before like this, and I thank you.
Well, it's owing to the great ideas of you alumni. That's what I said at the beginning of my talk, that the great pleasure for me is precisely working with you guys. And what I feel is a very special thing about Gallatin is the way that our alumni are continuing on the paths that they created, and they still are integrated with the sort of Gallatin vision in really important ways. So thank you for saying that. Anybody else interested in either asking a question or jumping in? So I just heard a ping, but I don't know if someone else joined us.
Suzanne, if it's all right, it's Danielle here. I do have a question. I know
Yes.
I'm hosting, so I try to.
You count, Danielle. You count. That's allowed.
No, I know. I just want to always.
You're an honorary Gallatino now.
You know, had I known, I would have gone to Gallatin. But I was a transfer student. So my question for the three of you is, you know, in this spirit of interdisciplinary ethos, is as poets, musicians, teachers, academics, and learners, what do you each take away from each other's work? And maybe you don't know enough yet, and we're going to share all the links and everything after, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that, if you may indulge us.
I mean, Dr. Roberts taught me already. I think academics, there's a lot of overlap, especially with musicians, because it is a cerebral art form. So there is a lot of overlap in and kind of a work that is governed by the mind. But I find that academics and activists and activism synthesizes reality in a way that I think as musicians, I can kind of, I'll speak, but speak personally for oneself, can kind of become somewhat distant from, the artist is often so often tunneling deep within the self. There are artists that specialize in really kind of coloring a cultural movement or describing a cultural experience. But my experience and a lot of collaborators that I work with is definitely tunneling in and trying to reach kind of deep within. And it's academics, activists, and thinkers that really inspire me and remind me to understand that effort is part of a larger context, and to endeavor to kind of reach myself deeper into that context, trying to understand the heart of where my work situates itself. Yeah. And then even just to Dr. Roberts, like even just, you know, living amongst those who continue to catch hell, like my goodness, you know, that's a thought right there. And that is my response, that reminds me the depth of what the weight of what my work means. It's not just about sound. It's not just about composition. It's about so much more.
Please call me Frank. So when it takes you 15 years to finally finish the PhD, you find yourself putting Dr. Frank Leon Roberts in your bio, but the reality is I'm Frank and we're all family. I get really, people refer to me as Dr. Roberts. I'm like, wait, who is that? I just wanted to say, just with regards to Jayshawn and Alicia, I mean, when I think of the two of you, I think of the words of the writer, Tony K. Bambara, who of course famously said, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And when I just hear you describe your work as artists first, right? Revolution, right? Meaning which I simply describe as a kind of a social transformation, seems so irresistible, so necessary. And then I'm not sure if the two of you are Black identified, but if you are, I just think about how as Black folk, we belong to a tradition where our simply pursuing the life of the mind has always been what Fred Moulton will call a fugitive act. It's always been criminal, right? Because because for so long it was literally illegal for us to do so. Then lastly, when I look at the whole group, what I see here, and I could be wrong, is I see a group that probably is almost exclusively women, people of color, and or queer folk. And I think that that is not by accident. I think that there is so often a relationship between those constituencies and radical change making. And Gallatin has been the space with Dean Wofford as its leader and others that have created that opportunity. So that fusion of women, queer folk, people of color, Black folk, we are the ones who took time on this Saturday afternoon to meet with each other. And maybe that's the answer to the question of what the future looks like, both short-term and long-term.
Interesting, interesting. Jayshawn, do you want to respond to the question of Danielle?
Yeah, one thing I feel like I'm pulling from everyone here today is just the affirmation of the work that we're doing, you know, to know that we've never, you know, Frank and Alicia, we've never met, but we all can come into this space and just share ideas and feelings and things that have impacted us personally or in proximity, and just reaffirm each other that the work we do as academics or artists are of equal importance and will continuously be built up with each other, through each other, even when we're not in the same room, even when we're not in the same time zone. Just thinking of like solidarity that exists outside of being in the US or being, you know, in New York or, you know, being Gallatinites, as we'll say, that will keep growing and keep expanding. Strong affirmation to the idea of being a scholar artist. It's something I would always describe myself during my time at Gallatin, which was just yesterday. But something that I'll continuously go for. And just thank you for that.
Well, I think it's really important for you to be able to draw on a network of people, you know, for Jayshawn to be able to draw on a network that includes Alicia and Frank, who come before him in terms of years, but to feel that you are united in sharing certain values and strategies, really they are. So it's exciting to hear this conversation, I have to say, and we have to think more about things to do together, because it's clearly really, it's important for all of us individually, as well as the larger community that can draw from this kind of conversation. So thank you all for joining. Thank the three of you for sharing your experiences. And Danielle, I have the impression we're over time. Is that right?
We are. We are.
I was hoping we could play a video and some music of Alicia at the end anyway. I don't know if that's allowed, but.
Of course, we have Alicia's audio queued up and ready to go for folks who maybe didn't hear it earlier. So we can definitely share that. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Jayshawn. Thank you, Alicia, for joining us and accepting our invitation and sharing yourselves and your work. We're very deeply grateful. And to Suzanne's point, we will continue the conversation and keep doing the work. And I'm excited to be working with you all. So thank you.
So are you going to put the music on now then?
Yes, we're going to get it
it.
queued up. And Alicia, Jayshawn, Frank, if you want to share your websites or anything too, please feel free in the chat. This is a great moment. And we can also follow up with folks after. I'll share the Gallatin alumni email if folks want to get anything specific. Let me find that. We do have 2 other Gallatin events this afternoon. We have conversations with Gallatin faculty, one with Louise Hartman in an hour at 2 o'clock, and another one with George Schulman at 3:30. So if folks are on the call and they want to stick around for those events, you can add them to your agenda on the Alumni and Parents Weekend event portal, and you'll get an automatic link to join in your agenda, just the same way you logged in here. Thank you, Alicia, for sharing your info. And Frank, I did share the syllabus info as well.
Okay, awesome.
Earlier, yeah. All right, we're gonna queue up the song and we wanna thank you all for coming. Feel free to join us at the next event, and thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon. Goodbye.
Trying to be, you want a soul, 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 soul. Oh, you the man, you the only man that I see in front of me. Right beside you, force behind you, got you covered here around the world to see. You want a soul. brother, man, I got the key. We'll make it over so deliciously. True, it was never built for you or me. I'ma show you how it's gonna be, so come along.